for anybody that hasn't tuned in before, this is Creative Lunch. It's a program that I started when social distancing started to occur, and it's through Art Plus People, collective and community of creative people that want to chat about creativity and how we can do a good job of serving people through the creative process. And I think that was one of the reasons I was so excited to have both of you on, because you're doing such an amazing project. And so thanks for being on Creative Lunch today.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah.
Take a photo.
So first off, Wendy, it's so nice to meet you. We haven't met before or talked at all.
Yeah, I know. This is very spontaneous for me, so I have to make sure I'm on my game here. Okay.
No, don't worry about it. This is I'm a very process-based artist, so this is more about having fun conversations and munching on tasty ideas, and so no pressure.
I know, it's funny. I looked at your website. I thought it was really interesting what you've done, and so
cool.
Congratulations to you as well. Yeah.
Well, thanks very much. I've also looked up some of what you've worked on at the Department of Transportation, and I have not a lot of questions, but I have some questions about the future of art in public space. And I feel like it's so wonderful that you're here, because I think you have a very unique and wise perspective.
We'll see. No problem. Yep.
So Claire, first off, why don't you, or either one of you, I guess, can one of you introduce, maybe you can introduce yourselves, or one of you can introduce the other, whatever you want to do. And then can you tell us a little bit about Subway Social Club?
Sure. I guess I can go first. Yeah, so I'm Claire Feuer. I'm the founder of the Subway Social Club. I grew up in Brooklyn, where my mom is currently now in the same house. And the Subway has always been a huge part of my life. And I think a lot of people can say that if you've lived in New York, you're used to kind of taking the Subway. And it's, for many, the main mode of transportation. So I'm 28 now, and we started the Subway Social Club in really actually this year, pretty much, 2020, right before coronavirus. And I kind of honestly was having a little bit of a identity, quarter life identity crisis. Like, what does it mean to, what am I doing? What's my passion? What do I love? And it all kept on coming back to New York. And then when I dug a little bit deeper, it all kind of started coming back to the Subway, because it was where I had a lot of my, so I spent so much time writing. And I think what you'll learn from my mom is she's also had a really big part in the Subway, and the Subway has meant a lot to her. So in a way, through my identity crisis, I realized, I love the Subway. My mom loves the Subway. Let's do something together. Let's collaborate. And I've always been a social person. I love talking to people, meeting new people. I think the best way to learn is to reach out and be proactive and kind of take in other people's experiences. So I figured, why not just talk to people? And I also noticed that no one talks on the Subway.
Sure.
It's kind of actually taboo. You can go to Reddit, see threads and threads and threads of people saying, do not talk, don't even look at people. So I just thought it'd be a good experiment. And I pitched the idea to a neighborhood group that I'm a part of, and right away there was just an instant kind of response. So the Subway Social Club is a group of writers who like to engage in conversation. So you just wear a pin when you're open to talking to someone, and then when you need time for yourself, you just take it off. It's a very kind of simple concept. Yeah, that's me and Subway Social Club.
I love it. I wear my pin. I wore it all through the winter. There wasn't a moment when I wasn't in the Subway with the pin on after I had it. And then once I stopped going to public transportation, it has remained on my winter jacket.
Yeah.
Did you have any experiences, Michael, from wearing the pin? Did people Matthew, sorry. I knew there was an M there. That from wearing it?
I didn't have any experiences talking to people who knew what it was, but because I would wear it while I was doing Subway therapy, a lot of people would ask me what it was. And so I ended up talking a lot about the initiative and
thank
Subway
you.
Social Club. Yeah, I mean, I'm such a huge fan of what you're putting together and that type of movement, because I think often about this missing neighborhood vibe that made people think that all the people around them were, supportive and there, and part of this like really diverse, awesome community that we're all, if I need a cup of sugar, I can like knock on your door and ask for it. And I think that's sort of missing in a lot of places, but especially in New York. I don't know who any of my neighbors are, and I think it's really unfortunate. So it's cool to have initiatives like Subway Social Club to encourage people to have good thoughts about strangers. It's really important.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Wendy, can you maybe introduce yourself a bit?
Sure. I'm Wendy. I'm Claire's mother, her mom. And I was thinking that there's an irony. When I was doing my master's thesis, my first topic was images of the subway system, going back to the early 1900s. I didn't do that, actually. I did a whole other topic to get my master's while I wasn't there. But when I got the job at the MTA in 1985 to start the Arts for Transit program, 1985, when the subway was in really, really not such great shape. So in a way, what it did was marry two things that I didn't know were passions. One was public transportation, and the other was art. But I hadn't realized that public art was really what I was interested in, or art in the public realm was really something that I wanted to deal with, which is different than art in a gallery, which is a whole other topic. It's
totally.
a very, very, very different thing. But it was marrying the idea of like having people coming to the subway and then they would see these amazing pieces of art, right? So that was starting in 85, and I was working at the MTA, and also as Claire is, sort of a passionate writer, feeling really strongly about the system, what a great system it is and has always been. It's had its ups and downs, of course, but it was really back on the upswing in the 90s when I left, and it makes me really, really sad to see what has happened to it. Although the art program has continued, and they've done really strong work. And now above ground at DOT, the Department of Transportation, which is all above ground, still working on public art in the realm of public.
Yeah. I don't want to get too into the politics of the Department of Transportation and the MTA, but I am sort of curious when you mention a degradation in the art culture or in like what is going on in transportation. Can you give an example of something that was kind of ramping up in the time before you left, and then what you've seen kind of slide backwards? Or
I'm not going to be saying anything that hasn't been written about, actually.
Sure.
I'm talking only about the mass transit system. In the 70s and the 80s, of course, but historically, there was a disinvestment in the mass transit system. Cities were on the downhill. Nobody wanted to live in cities. Everybody thought suburbia. It was sort of, this is a very broad brush, this, result of like car culture, moving to the suburbs, your kids having a backyard, blah, 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 right?
Right.
Then in the 70s and 80s, starting in the early 80s, people were realizing maybe that's not such a great thing, right? And people wanted to move back to cities, and there became more investment back into the mass transit system starting in the early 80s, ramping up through the 80s and into the 90s. Very complicated, very smart bunch of people. Claire and I have interviewed some of the people that I worked with who really helped put the art mass transit system back together again. They're really sort of unsung heroes, and financially and then physically. So then into the 90s, I remember that they thought there was an article written about how the MTA, in a certain sense, was one of the great Fortune 500 companies. That's how good it got. But then the disinvestment started again. And, politics got intervene. someone got elected to governor who was less interested in it, you know, and so it's slow back into like not disinvestment again. And there we are. And that it's a cycle. It's really, and it's very sad to watch. There has to be constant investment in the mass transit system.
Claire,
So,
has it, listening to this, it makes me think, so my mom is a school teacher, and I've listened to a lot of, she's actually texting me right now because I think she can't figure out how to get into this room. I'm going to send her an invite really quick.
Okay.
Yeah, go
that she can
ahead.
join.
Yeah.
And then I'm going to tune back in. Thanks for letting me pause for a sec.
No problem.
Moms are very important, I think.
Yeah. Well, it's good to have a good relationship.
Claire, I'm curious, you know, I listened to my mom a lot talk about school, and it gave me this really interesting framework that allowed me to think about what education is for different people and what systematically, I mean, she was really a talented teacher. And so institutionally, she gave me an understanding of where the cracks were and where instability was. Did you also glean a lot of information as you were growing up, listening to your mom talk about public transportation, or was that something that wasn't really in the dialogue at home?
Interesting.
Good question.
I really don't think it was in the dialogue. I mean, maybe it was, and maybe I just wasn't listening. Sorry, Mom. I think what makes this project very special to a degree is, you know, now I see it kind of as I'm kind of like following my mom in her footsteps a little bit. But I had a lot of my own experiences on the subway separate to her. That I think is really important. So a lot of the cracks I see now don't really, in fact, we kind of disagreed with them in kind of in the first place. Like, I wanted to be social, like build this society that, you know, everyone can talk if they want to. And my mom, on the other hand, was like, well, actually, I understand people don't want to talk. So I think it's what makes the project strong is that we're coming at it from very different perspectives. You know, we're both different, obviously, for different ages. She has a lot more in terms of like knowledge, like politically and how the system works, and I have a different, more cultural approach. But I think growing up, there are little memories, you know, that I remember. It's like riding the train with my mom. You know, the fact that she still gets mad at me when I don't know, you know, which way, you know, to get in the front or the back of the train, or, you know, the fact that I don't know all the trains on like the east side. And to be honest, even my home station, I get confused as to which way to go out of the station to this day. So in terms of like an influence that she's had, I mean, I have so many memories riding with her, you know, like rushing down the train and, you know, me like frantically being like, wait for me. But I think she did a great job of letting me kind of, not like forcing her passion onto me, but letting me kind of discover the train on my own, and really the freedom to ride at an early age was really helpful.
When did you start riding the subway by yourself?
I was 11.
So this is something that I find so fascinating about New York City kids, because I think maybe I was riding my bike around town at 11. But also, when I think of New York and raising a young person here, it's difficult to think of like my like 10, 11-year-old starting to ride the subway by themselves. And, you know, I do subway therapy. So I'm out there with, you know, installations, and I know people in the community. And there was this one young man who would come up with his parents. And then I remember the first day that he was by himself.
Wow.
And I was like, my dude, is this, do you ride the subway by yourself now? He's like, yep, all by myself. I was like, sick. That's awesome. But it's, you know, people, and maybe this is my perception, I think people grow up so fast in New York, in part because they have so much exposure, but also because they're given a lot of responsibility and power. Even like is Subway Social Club something you would not encourage an 11-year-old to do because it like puts themselves in like a vulnerable situation? Or do you assume that people who are wearing the pin are all like in on it, you know?
Yeah, so we actually have so where I grew up in Borum Hill, there's a lot, it's very family oriented.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people were actually reaching out for pins for their children. So, which I thought was fascinating. One of our actually, I think one of our biggest champions is actually like a 15-year-old. And I've had parents send me photos of like their 2-year-old or like 3-year-old who's obsessed with trains, and even though like their 7-year-old. So I think I think we attract a certain type of person who's very kind of open and likes talking to different, just like not a creepy person too. So I think it's the type of people that we attract, that are just, I don't know. I think being social in the subway should be. I think there's such a joy. Actually, I have a photo of this small child. He might have been like 1.5, just talking to this guy, and it was because I just mentioned kind of I wanted to take a photo of him, and then the guy was like, "Oh, take a photo of me," and then all of a sudden this budding friendship happens. And where is this? I have it right here. It was just so beautiful, and I was like, "This is why I'm doing what I'm." Can you see it? And they didn't know each
That's
other.
amazing.
And
So cute, isn't it?
the boy didn't even know how to talk. And this beautiful kind of friendship just came out of it. And I was like, this is why the Subway Social Club exists, for these types of relationships too.
That's amazing. And I've ended up developing some of those relationships, or seeing those relationships happen through my work too. And so it's so refreshing to see someone else that's really interested in doing the work. And I I wonder, Wendy, when I think about the work and what it is that you're doing, do you think there is like, in terms of the infrastructure of New York City, a lot of people talk about it being this amazing place and there's all these opportunities and you can come here and get discovered and whatever it is, but that's all relatively changing. And I think that the interconnectedness of the city maybe needs some support. Do you think that initiatives like Subway Therapy or Subway Social Club, what role do they play in the infrastructure of public space?
It's really interesting because Claire said something before about our different perspectives. Obviously, I'm older, right? I've been here for a long time. I grew up taking the subway. I didn't grow up in New York, but my father was a police officer in the NYPD. And so he had me going to the dentist in Manhattan when I was like also 12 or 13. And I was told Claire that he was the person who started me on like, this is the exact car you get into, like giving me very, very specific instructions. And that was a long time ago. But what's opening my eyes are people your age and Claire's age. Claire grew up here. As she said, we have a very social block. We have a very special block. And we have a lot of people who, when she grew up, and I was noticing this the other day, the young kids now are like playing with each other on the block, right? Mm-hmm. When she grew up, that was the case with her. Like they would all be outside playing together. And what I realized from something we did the other night, Claire had a Zoom thing as well, are people like you who've come to the city. Mm-hmm. So what's the difference between people who've come to the city and one guy I spoke to, Joel, he was like, I came to the city and at first I was like open, I talked to anybody. And then it was like, oh, it's not cool. It's not cool to talk to people in the subway. So like as a young person, or relatively, it's like, that's not cool as a New Yorker. And then I was saying to Claire and I talked about it afterwards, like, yeah, it's okay to do that. You know what I mean? And I think there's an image. I once went to a dinner party with people probably half my age and they all sort of, it was the strangest thing. They asked me at the dinner party afterwards, they go, do you think we're New Yorkers yet? Or something like that. And I was like, and these are all people who have like really good jobs here, younger, they've been here for a while. It's like, what does that mean? I'm like, I looked at them like, yeah, what does that mean? So there's this image of New York that you get from when you're outside the city, then you're here and it's like, am I cool enough? Well, like, you know, ultimately, not to be too zen about it, but like be yourself, and that's cool, right?
Yeah.
So for me, it may be, and this is what I say to Claire, like, I may not want to talk some days, and I may want to talk some days, and I don't need to necessarily meet strangers. But if you're young and you're coming here, like, sure, go for it. That's cool as anything else is cool. But there's this inhibition of what it means to do that. You know.
Yeah, I understand. I mean, coming from a transplant perspective,
right?
I think often about, well, am I taking up the space that somebody else that's like should be available for somebody else? Even when I'm doing my sticky note projects, I think they're really meaningful for people, not because I think they're awesome intrinsically, even though I do. More so, I like them because I've met like a ton of New Yorkers that love it and they tell me they like it. But, you know, some days I'll go out and I follow pretty standard busking rules. So if somebody's playing music in the spot that I would normally set up in, I'll just like go somewhere else and not be upset about it. And similarly, but in the inverse of that, sometimes I'll set up and then I'll see one of the musicians come down that would normally be in that spot on a different day. And then I think to myself, like, am I taking this person's spot who, you know, I don't know, does he need it more? I mean, there's plenty of places to play music in the subway, but am I like this transplant from California that's taking up space where native New Yorkers should be out hustling and making their living? These are like things I think about.
But to be honest, you don't even know if they're from New York.
Right.
That's true. That's true. Right. Also, thanks for jumping in. If anybody wants to just jump in and say something, you're more than welcome. This is sort of like an interview and it'll probably end up in a podcast of some kind. But if you want to jump in because you have a question, there's a chat function. I'm going to give a quick tutorial on Zoom for anybody who's just joining. There's a chat button. You can press it. You can say hi. You can make comments. You can ask questions, and then we can enrich our conversation with your contribution. I think at least all three of us who are in the art participatory communication community side of things, we would all love for people to jump in, I think, right?
Right. No problem.
Yep. I would really like to, something I really enjoyed doing on these talks is just going on people's websites and scrolling through and talking about stuff. Can we do that for Subway Social Club?
Sure.
So I'm going to screen share.
There might be some buttons that don't work. Just kidding.
That's all right. Okay. So if somebody sees, just to like give a basic overview from my understanding, you can correct me if I'm wrong. Subway Social Club is a group of New Yorkers who are really passionate about conversation and connection. And there's a pin that you can wear, which looks like this that we're seeing on the screen.
Yeah.
And you can have conversations with other people. It's a wearable that encourages you to be open to a conversation with a stranger.
Correct.
And who designed this?
Oh, my friend Caroline Tanner. She's amazing. I was really happy with the pin, actually. I gave her very little direction, and she created it. She's a graphic designer that I met. She's a colleague's girlfriend.
Okay.
Yeah. So really thrilled with it. I really think it kind of captures like the chaos with all the lines, but also this cool like font. And then it was really important that it was unisex because I want it to be, you know.
I love it. And it's something that I think I wish I would have done sooner is Subway therapy. I've been doing it for 4 years in the subway and I still don't have any like logo or like brand identity. And you guys just had that right off the bat, which I think is so cool.
Thank you. Oh yeah, and then my Instagram.
we're gonna comb through Instagram too, but you guys have gotten some press. You've been on
Yeah, we
Fox
got some
5.
press. Yeah.
I'm curious, how often do people talk about the story that it's a mother-daughter duo? I mean, I love the idea of it. My mom's on the stream right now. I love thinking about doing something with her in the future because she's an educator and extremely talented, and I'm in the arts and community, and so it just seems like we could synergize. Do people often talk about that with you?
I think so. I mean, I think it's really, I mean, it adds to kind of our relationship. One, we're a very different kind of family. I'm adopted. I think it reflects New York and the authenticity and also that anyone can, you know, we have a unique family dynamic. Like those are my two parents. It's a very kind of New York story, I think, in a way.
Sure.
But also, because of my mom's background, I thought it was very important for her to be a part of the story. And I started it actually as it's called Platform 180, which we then changed to Subway Social Club because it had a better ring to it. But the broader kind of goal and the mission of the Subway Social Club is actually not just the pins, but it's more of a holistic approach to the New York City subway.
Okay.
So it's very important for my mom to be a part of that.
So if I go, I'm just going to scroll through.
Sure.
So you're on a mission. There's 5.4 million people that ride the subway.
Now, it's not, ridership is down about 90%, but I'm going to keep that statistic there.
So if anybody's interested in getting a pin, if you're in New York or anywhere else, you can buy them. It's pretty great. I love having my pin. I think everybody should wear them if they want to have a conversation. And I like that you sell them in a set of 4.
Yes. Yeah. And Nikwana was my boss, but she helped me kind of walk through the packaging and the pricing and stuff like that from a buyer's background. But it's a set of 4 because the whole idea is that you give the other 3 away.
That's so cool. And you have a blog? Is there a blog? Are you doing blog posts?
So we've done blog posts. I have to actually work on that more, but that's taking a more holistic approach to the subway.
That's awesome. So I'm just real quick, I'm going to look at your Instagram. It seems like you guys have just been killing it in terms of producing content. And I know sometimes there's a weird balance between doing something that's really great and creating content. Who's making all of this content?
Claire.
It's me, but we're actually, I think when it comes to branding, there's a lot to learn and kind of like email marketing.
Sure.
My friend Ellison, who's actually on this call, I think now, he does a great daily emails with great kind of marketing tips and email tips, which are fantastic. But I think branding is an area of opportunity for us and to get the word out more.
Sure.
Branding,
Matthew, I did want to also respond to something you said, which is really interesting in the inhibitions that people have. Like you're saying, your experience with subway therapy is that people do want to talk. And I've been amazed at Claire, actually, and how she will just have a way of not being pushy, but somehow sort of getting people, in a very gentle way, just opening up a conversation. That's an art in a certain sense. And you probably have that experience, like you're out there, and that's what people really think about New York in a way, even though there's this one image of like, oh, people don't want to talk to each other. The fact is, as you probably experienced, people do want to talk to each other. They do. And so the gentle pushing a little bit, or not pushing, but sort of opening up that conversation, people welcome that. And I think that's what Claire and you are doing. You're giving an opportunity to people.
Sure.
In a way. And I think that's important.
Yeah, I think having the door open is just a really nice thing. I was walking around yesterday with a woman that wanted to take a picture of me for this thing called Stoop Stories.
Oh yeah.
Claire, have you heard about it?
Yeah, I think she's one of our neighbors, Mom.
Yes, actually, that's true. She is.
Margie, right?
Yeah, Marge.
Yeah.
She's so great. She was busy today. I told her to jump on the call, so that would have been fun. But
Yeah.
we were walking around, and she just had such a love for the architecture in New York. And as we were walking around, she would say, "Oh my gosh, look at the ivy on that building!" And we were in Fort Greene, which is where I am now. So we're like almost neighbors too, I guess. And we were walking by this one building, and there was this guy sitting outside who looked super hard, like just smoking a cigarette, had a beer, not smiling. And he was, but there was jazz music playing, and he lived right on the same block as Fort Greene Park. And so like people were loving it. And it was like, is he loving it? It was not obvious, but she walked up and she was like, "Hey, I love the music." And he's like, "Uh-huh." And she's like, "Are you playing this music?" And he's like, "Yeah." She's like, "I love your stoop." And it was super funny because he just didn't seem that into it. And then all of a sudden they just started having a conversation. And she like mentioned that she grew up in New York in the neighborhood and was like happy to see people like being part of the vibrant neighborhood. And then this guy was like, "Well, actually I moved here from Carolina or something." and he said that he'd been there for 20 years. And she was like, "You've been here long enough. You're a New Yorker." It was just like this funny exchange. But yeah, I think people want to chat. They just need some opening to do it.
Prompting, I think, is the word. I do want to say what I think part of my openness is because when we would be putting art into the subway stations and I would be there, people would always say things.
Right.
Positive, mostly positive. So I think it was that experience that helped me understand that people do like to comment and say things.
Yeah. I have some questions from people in the chat. I have one from Andy and then one from Nikwana. And I would actually love if you could unmute yourself and ask yourself. I would really like that so we can hear voices of other people asking stuff. Andy, do you want to ask your question?
Sure. Here, I'll turn on my video. I'm just in my childhood bedroom and the reporter's room because I have had no control over it in the past few years. So
Where are you?
I'm in New Jersey.
Oh, me too. Nice.
Oh, really? Nice.
Jersey City.
I'm in a tiny town called Harrington Park, but it's close to Closter or Old Tappan.
Oh, cool.
If you know that, it's Bergen County.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's been really nice to have a lawn and be able to walk around a neighborhood and see trees like every day.
Are you from New York? You live in New York City usually?
I do. I live in downtown Brooklyn. Yeah. But I've been with family for a little bit now, like a week.
Oh, I'm glad.
Yeah. Okay, so I have seen the pin because of Matt, and it's awesome, and I think it's super cute, and I love that it's something that I could just put on my fanny pack. I think it's on there. Matt, you should have access to it if you look for it.
Let me see if I can find it.
But I had a couple questions. So I guess the first question is, actually, I'm going to reverse the order of how I asked it. The first question I'm curious about is when you like actually give people the pin, do you usually give them instructions as well on how to use it? So I love that you have a pack of 4. I think that makes total sense. Like once someone actually has the pin, like the totem, like what happens next? Like how often do conversations actually start because of the pin? You know, is the onus kind of on the owner of the pin to start the conversation, or just be open and like let people speak to them? Are there things that you equip them with? And also, if not, you know, how do these organic conversations happen? Do you have any like typical scenarios or stories that come up?
Yeah, sure. Those are great questions. And definitely we'll be thinking of them more and more. So, there are 5.4 million riders, and I think to date we've sold about 200 sets. So that's, 800, and then given away about 100 or 200 more. So in terms of the way I was saying it worked is you have a pin, and then you'd see someone else with a pin on, and then you'd start a conversation. So there's only 1,000 pins out there. So I don't think, it's very kind of unlikely that you'll ride the train and see someone currently, pre-COVID with the pin on. So in terms of conversation right now, it really is kind of on the pin wearer to have, be confident. And if you see someone looking at it, kind of go into a conversation. We've had some conversations happen. People have DM'd me saying, my daughter saw her teacher at school that she normally doesn't talk to, and she's had a conversation. It was great to meet her teacher. But I think there's a lot of opportunity for us to, one, get the pin out and market it more, because once there's more people, that there'll be a better chance that you'll find someone. And in terms of having a pamphlet, that's like really incredible. I love the idea. We don't have anything that we kind of give along with it or any instructions. It really started kind of an experiment about a month before COVID happened or is happening. So I really wanted to kind of see how people were having their own conversations. And then we were thinking of eventually kind of doing a video or a tutorial of how I have conversations and start them. And then also writing up kind of tips, or having a Facebook group where people shared how they get people to talk with them. So we don't include anything now, but we are hoping to do so.
But we did think about it. Claire, remember we did think about having a card that we would hand up in with.
Yeah.
So we'd have these cards made up and say,
this is how
it, and you don't have to talk, or you know what I mean? Like, nobody has to talk, but like when you want to. And also your website, or the website for Subway Social Club, the blog.
Yeah. But I do think it's a very interesting, I do think it needs to come with something. I think one of the things I take advantage of being like being a founder and being very passionate is having a conversation comes very naturally to me, and kind of forcing myself to be out of the box is a challenge that I personally love. But a lot of people who might be wearing these pins, might be the complete opposite. They're wearing it because they want to have a conversation, but they're truly introverted. They truly don't know how to have these conversations, and especially in a place that's taboo. So I think, thank you for reminding Andy that we should, people love connection, but being that person to connect, to initiate connection is really, really difficult.
Totally. I mean, I could totally see an opportunity for workshops that happen where you start to learn how to facilitate conversations, or get forced to have conversations, because to your point, I think there are a lot of people who want someone to come up to them but don't necessarily even know if someone makes eye contact to say the first word. Because going back to what you guys were talking about with young people nowadays feeling shy or a little awkward, or not necessarily knowing how to be in their own skin, like that neighborly environment is not, or culture is not super commonplace nowadays, especially in New York.
Definitely.
But, let me just say something. How many, when you look at Metropolitan Diary, or there are so many people, Claire's getting nervous when I'm talking, that have met. What's she gonna say?
I mean, how many people read I don't read the Metropolitan.
But it's all about connecting on the subway. And also, I can tell you from my own experience, not my own experience, but having people contact me when I was at the MTA, of people meeting on the subway. Like you get that, and then they get off the train, and then they meet and they walk together and stuff like that. Young people mostly. Mm-hmm. So I think there have been people who actually do connect on the subway.
Yeah, definitely.
I would like to transition to Nikwana. We can continue, of course, our conversation, but I want Nikwana to be able to answer her question. You want to unmute yourself and ask?
Yeah. I actually wanted to piggyback off what Andy was saying about the little adding a little pamphlet or something describing it. I liked that idea too. But then what I also like about not including it is that if someone were gifted it, it kind of forces that conversation because it's going to ignite, well, what is this? Why did you send me this? And I felt like that was the whole thing that what the project meant, is opening that communication. So the more you include, the less you get that interaction because
that's a good point.
Someone's not reaching out to ask a question. I don't know, but I see it both ways of it being, you know, good either way. But my question was, you riding the subway, do you see a difference in social activity across subway lines? Like, because for me, like, I feel like riding the J is different than riding, you know, the F train or something like that. Or do you see a difference if you're riding the same subway line, but a different route? So you're riding the A train, but going uptown versus downtown. I mean, anyone can answer.
Yeah, I have an answer for this, but if Claire or Wendy, you want to jump in?
No, you go.
Yeah, for me, you know, I ride the subway a lot, and I end up staying in the subway platforms for various reasons. And one of the funny parts that I've noticed is the thing that I notice the most is when showtime shows up. And for anybody that doesn't know what showtime is, it's people who are doing pole dancing or dancing with hats and things like that. And they're actually just incredible. Like, some aren't good, but some are just like Cirque du Soleil level performers. They're like super strong, doing like really crazy flips and stuff. And I almost exclusively see them on stations that have really long stops. So, you know, in between Williamsburg and First Ave, Bedford and First Ave, you have like this long stop. And so you end up having more arts on those trains that have like these really long stops. So a lot of express trains have them. And then usually they're at the intersection of a place, like from what's the first stop? Canal Street to DeKalb, or J Street on the Q. Like, that's another big one. The J is the same way going across the bridge. So like the actual subways tend to have different riders depending on where you live, for sure. I also used to ride the train down to Canarsie to teach. And so, like, you know, whiteness wise, it was really interesting to see that, like, by the time I got to the end of the stop, I would be the only white person on the train, which, you know, ultimately changes the nature in which people would interact with me or the way I would interact with other people. You know, at 7 o'clock in the morning in Canarsie, I'm assuming nobody wants to have a conversation with me. But similarly, at 7 o'clock in the morning, I don't think anybody in Manhattan wants to have a conversation with me either. So, you know, anyway, those are some thoughts.
What I loved is I've taken I've taken a lot of trains, and I love the AC. Well, and I just love like taking trains where people are on them. But I found really that there really isn't a difference in terms of, like, from the social subway club perspective. I've had amazing conversations on the upper East Side. I've had amazing conversations on the Upper West Side. And I think it goes back into how you're able to draw someone out. And I've had people say, this is my stop, but I'm having a great conversation with you, so I want to continue going. And I think what's magical about New York City in particular, is you really never know who you'll meet, and how much I think that people are willing to share when you actively listen. The great thing about the subway when you're riding is you don't really have access to streaming something because you don't have the Wi-Fi. And it's a great way to just, I think when you connect with someone and you're just truly listening, there really isn't anything kind of kind of greater, I think, than being heard and then acknowledging that you're really learning something about this person's life, and that experience is unique, and that you're part of that their world now because you took the time to listen. And I think when people acknowledge and realize that you are interested in them, they'll tell you a whole world of secrets and stories. And that's regardless of the train, which I think is great.
I'm more interested as an observer of watching the choir, where people get on and off. It's almost like I still work for the mass transit system, even though I haven't worked for them for like 30 years. Like, where are people getting on? Where are they getting off? What's the demographics? What's the color? What's the age? I'm just interested in all that. And of course, I'm interested in the clothes, right? I'm very interested in shoes. So I like to look at the shoes that people are wearing, right? And it's like, cool shoes. Or I've done that too, mostly because of Claire's inspiration, actually, where I've talked to people, it's like, wow, that's an amazing bag. Where did you get that? I remember talking to a guy, like, he says, well, my brother made it. And I took it down, and I don't think I ordered it, probably too expensive. But anyway, it's that kind of interaction and just observation that I'm always interested. I'm also interested in who gives money to people who beg on the subway, because I ran the homeless outreach program for a while, so I was always interested in that. So it's a little more sociology, anthropology, observation that I'm interested in.
Well, you also did Music Under New York. And I'm always fascinated by seeing people gravitate towards musicians. So if there's a musician, you'll see, what I've tended to see is that people will just naturally gravitate towards where the musician is playing. Right. And also sunlight. I think the MTA did a very large, kind of extensive study of sunlight. So stations, like, people will will move to where the sunlight is, and which is great too, when there's natural light.
I have a question about Music Under New York, because I think it's one of the greatest things that I've seen in the New York subway. I love all the public art. I like being a participant in public art, but the opportunity for somebody to audition to then have like a designated space takes a lot of the anxiety and stress away from going to busk or to play music for money in a specific place. Yeah. I know for me, since I don't have a permit or anything like that, I have like some like loose connections at the MTA, and so like my work generally is not frowned upon or removed, but I just got a ticket, I think 5 months ago.
Wow.
And it was the first ticket I ever got in 4 years, and it was super funny and weird, and anyway, it made the news. It was good press. I liked that it happened.
No, what we used to say, no press is bad press.
Yeah. But I'm curious, do you think that can you imagine a world, or do you think this would be a good thing if there was some permitting system for individuals to go and do activations in the subway, like yours or mine? There are things that are voted on by the community that would allow people to go and do public works that are for the public benefit through some kind of audition, but not, like I can't really audition with Subway Therapy,
Right. You're asking.
I think so.
You asked Claire that question.
I think so. I mean, when you think, Matthew, a lot of your installations happen in like tunnels where there's really nothing.
Yeah.
Besides people walking. I think actually what we need to do, and I think the MTA needs to recognize this too, is that one, there's tons of real estate that could be used up by artists and people who are generally wanting to bring people into the station. And their budget, because of the coronavirus, they're going to be $8.5 billion in debt. I think we need to pay more attention to the subway, get people interested in riding the subway. And one way to do that is to get people wanting to be in the station. And to do that, why not make it like the place to be?
Sure.
Have art, have pop-up things going on, have discussions where it only costs you $2.50 or get someone to swipe you in for free, whatever. But I think a lot of times we think of the subway as the mode of transportation to get you to your destination. What if we change that psychologically and been like, this is a destination. West 4th Street is the destination to be. And I think the MTA should be on board.
I would think so too. I mean, I love that concept of I think that the subway is a place to be. I love it. It's so interesting. It's weird and awesome.
Okay, you too. Okay, you guys. So this is what I say to Claire, which is, I go, good ideas. I get a lot of good ideas.
Yeah.
Implementing good ideas is another issue.
Totally.
Do you think the MTA would be open to it?
Huh?
Do you think the MTA would be open to similar? I
can't speak for the MTA. I just think that, managing something like that, of having like, as you know, at this point with the auditions for the reason the auditions came out in the 80s, late 80s, early 90s, was because it was sort of chaos. Like, everybody was playing everywhere they wanted. So there was a whole idea of, it's funny because I was speaking to the lawyer who sort of argued the case for the MTA of time, place, and manner, right? Because it's a working subway system. The first thing that they do, it's a working subway system. So there were a lot of really good ideas, but the reason we had auditions was because we wanted to be available to anybody, but then sort of control it. I don't know how many musicians they have now, probably hundreds.
Yeah.
And they're located. So you could start opening up the box to this sort of a chaos, unless maybe an idea is that similar to what we do at DOT above ground, is we identify sites that are the safe, available sites, and then they could help that. They do that with Music Under New York. There are specific sites that are not dangerous for people or interfering with passengers.
Together.
Yeah. I mean, their whole idea is, they run the subway. So the idea is to first get the people where they need to go, right?
Right.
But your idea of making it a destination is a little counter to the purpose of the mass transit system.
Sure. That's fair.
But having said that, I think the A, the C, those with huge mezzanines, the ACE, they have those huge mezzanines. That may be a nice location where you could do things like that.
Yeah, I can definitely see it. One of the first places I ever got kicked out of the subway was doing subway therapy at 8th Avenue on the ACE. And, I was like way off. This is before I was doing anything sticky note related. I just had a table and chairs with a sign that said subway therapy and some wall art that I put up. So I didn't take up any more space than anyone else that was playing guitar or anything like that. But they kicked me out. I mean, it's a huge mezzanine. It's massive. There's no reason.
That's where I could see this happening, because I think that there's just an enormous amount of space.
All right. Nikwana, I see you have a question.
Yes, I actually have a question and a comment. So my first question is, Claire, I know you used to journal a lot on the train. Since you've been doing this, have you stopped and just talked to people more, or do you do half and half? I mean, before the stay-home orders.
It's all good. Do what you got to do.
I journal. Yeah, I still journal. I really have to be kind of in the mood to talk to someone too. So I don't always talk to people. So I split the time between journaling and non-journaling. And I thought it would actually be cool to once we have more, for people who like to journal, to actually meet up and then go someplace and en route journal together. Because usually it's a very solitary thing to do, but I think doing it in a group. I just imagine someone getting on the train and all the seats are taken up with people journaling and just people what is going on?
And somebody gets on the train, they're like, what the fuck? I'm trying to sit.
Yeah. Yeah. And I just thought it'd be a lot of fun.
Improv everywhere, but not.
Yeah. I think too,
sorry.
Yeah, sorry, go on. No, go on.
No, go ahead.
No, you go.
Oh, so my comment was, I do appreciate what you guys are doing because I've lived in New York for what, 20, 30 years. And what I really like, I used to like riding the subway. And then I had anxiety riding the subway because I was young and I went through things such as 9/11 where I was stuck on the train. And I experienced things like that during that time, along with being stuck on the train for an hour or 2 hours in the middle of the summer and it's 100 degrees underground and it's blacked out. So I'm like traumatized by that. But what I really like with this initiative is that it encouraging people to talk outside of those traumatic times, because that creates an ease and comfort for people who suffer with anxiety. You never know what people are going through or what they have been through. So that can be a comfort to someone, knowing that, hey, this person is there to speak. You can speak with this person. Honestly, when I used to get on the train, I would sometimes spot out. I would, like your mom said, I would kind of browse the crowd and just be like an anthropologist studying people. But one thing that I used to do was, if something were to happen on the train, who on this train is responsible or looks responsible? I used to get on the train with that thought, like, if something were to really go down, who would stand up? Like, who would defend someone else? Who would help? And that's just something I thought about. And I mean, I'm not in New York now to have this social experiment with the social club, but I just find it really interesting, all of it.
Sure.
Yeah, I found that. Yeah, thanks for sharing. And yeah, whoa. Yeah, going to like what you said about 9/11, I think people have, I think what's beautiful about it, like, one, telling us your story. That was like very interesting to hear. And I think that a lot of people have stories about the subway, that are positive, that are negative. And I think during this time, the subway in general is at its the biggest crisis it's ever been. In 2017, they had, Cuomo declared a state of emergency. And now the subway is facing, who knows what's going to happen. Completely in debt. There's going to be lines cut. People aren't going to be able to get to work. Someone said it's the spine that our economy kind of runs on. And, the Subway Social Club, right now it's currently about getting people to talk on the subway. But I think the larger part of it is just shining a light on the subway, regardless of whether you like it or whether you dislike it. I think there needs to be more discussion about the subway, and not just from, the media does a great job of saying how much money it's losing. We have a great group of, people who are dedicated to talking specifically, nerding out about the trains. And then we have kind of bloggers from like 2017 who tell people how to swipe their Metro card. But where I find a niche in this community is really people who just kind of the subway as part of their identity, and this modern day kind of identity, what the subway means to them. And I think that's missing in a lot of media, and a lot of, like, if you look up Subway blog right now, you'll find someone's presentation that they made on the infrastructure of the subway. But what about, like, I don't see my portrayal of the subway in the media at all. And I think there's an opportunity. So I think before we even get to being social, we have to, in a way, we kind of have to look at how the subway is being portrayed, but also save it, because it is such a big part of New York, and as a symbol of connection. So I think that's the broader kind of vision that we have. And being social on the train, you don't even have to wear it to be a part of the Subway Social Club too. It's just an acknowledgement that the subway has played a part in your life. And I posted on a Facebook group called Girls Love Travel. There's 1.1 million girls, and I just posted saying, I miss the subway. Have you taken it? What are your thoughts on it? And it was up for about, and it's still on there, for about an hour. And in that hour, I received 500 comments
Wow.
From women who really don't even live in New York. Some of them do, but the majority of them just giving me directions or giving me their thoughts, saying, I loved it. It was great. And then, and then what's really interesting was that people from New York who didn't even like it made a comment one to say, I'm from New York. I know the Subway. And then give me a whole spiel of like why they don't like the Subway. And I think it's interesting to acknowledge that, you know, and it made me realize to branch out. Like the club doesn't necessarily be for people who love it. It can even be for people who dislike it, but who might have a strong connection to it. Like the Gothamist wrote an article basically, you know, about the club, and it got 189 comments of people basically being shitting on the idea, whatever. And then I realized I struck a nerve because the Subway, regardless of whether they want to talk or not, is so ingrained into New Yorkers' identity.
All right, don't worry about it.
That maybe this club, it can be about talking to people when you want to, but maybe, you know, it could be even broader than that and be for people who just generally have a connection to the Subway.
Yeah, sure.
And I think people don't really tap into that. Like they don't want to. But I think if someone were to meet someone else who didn't like the Subway, so many stories would be shared and
totally. And one of the great things about somebody not liking the Subway interacting with somebody that does is that they have a conversation, and then you know, even if people don't like the Subway, they still tell stories about whatever these like weird experiences are, and that builds the framework of community in New York.
Exactly. Yeah.
I want to be conscious of time and respectful, because I'm really happy that you were here. One thing that I wanted to say is, if in any way you have help, or if you need an extra hand or help with Subway Social Club, I'm like 100% your biggest fan, both of you. I just think the work you're doing is amazing. To tap on Andy's, or to jump off of Andy's comment about having maybe like a little pamphlet or something like that. If you're interested in doing like a guideline for conversation, I have tons of conversations with strangers, and I've been developing something like that myself. So I'd love to talk to you about how we could collaborate on something about conversations and people and all that fun stuff. And then, you know, if I can be of any assistance, I would love to. Thank you, everybody.
It seems like there's a really nice, Matthew, overlap, and there may be a way we could strengthen each other, and somehow Claire can tap into your thing and for her group, and vice versa. So it really sounds like there's a nice overlap here.
On that side, I don't have a question for next week. And so I was curious if Claire or Wendy, do either of you have a question? If you were Subway Therapy, you're going to ask a question of the week to the Subway audience, and we could do a collaboration. It would be really fun. But if you could ask however many thousands of people will see it, what would you ask?
Ooh, that's a good one. Mom, do you have an idea?
This could be a Subway Social Club question of the week too. It's not like it has to be a thing, but I write them on sticky notes. So this apartment, as you can see, is covered in different questions and contributions to those notes. So
I'm just thinking.
I want to do one where it's like, or maybe like, what about the Subway do you miss? But I think I don't want it to like, because then that's like assuming that people miss the Subway.
We can assume. I miss it.
You're like, what, Mom, do you have?
No, I like that. What is it about the Subway that you miss? I like that.
I'm actually thinking, you know, one thing that I haven't really done yet is any charity work. And I would be really interested to see what kind of thing we might want to build that would help the Subway to continue. I think if I don't do a question related to the Subway this week, maybe in the following weeks we can do something more put together that could go toward the support of.
You know, I think what you're saying is an interesting thing of, you know, they're not going to take donations, but the notion of how do you think you could be helpful to the Subway once it starts back again.
Mm-hmm.
You know, what are some thoughts? And that might be a lot of fun and interesting and helpful. I think both of you, which is really important, and Claire brought this up, again, not to dwell on it, is that, you know, what I say too is that people love to jump on negativity, right?
Mm-hmm.
They just jump on it, right? So like, rah, 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 rah. But if you can just switch that and be positive, then people jump onto that, can jump onto that. And that's what you're saying. And I'm not even talking about Pollyanna. I'm not saying that at all. I think it's good to be critical in a good way, in a productive way. But like, excuse me for saying it, like whining, it doesn't help anything. So if you can just sort of move off, you know, like the idea of like moving off, venting is good, not a problem, but how do you switch that? Like, and I think that's what you're trying to do. And I think what Claire is trying to do. I mean, I know that's what the Subway Social Club is doing, is sort of, sure, if there are really productive things that you can recommend, that's one thing.
Yeah. Or like something like your favorite spot, like taking.
Those are the things that, just prompting people to think in a more positive way rather than just opening it up to, because people just sort of, just human condition, sort of, not everyone, but a lot of people just love jumping on that.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I think that's a great way to go.
As a Subway therapy, you understand that, I'm sure.
Yes, I do. I have a lot of conversations with people that are very important from what I can tell.
Yeah.
Also, before we go, I wanted to say I did end up finding a pin.
Oh!
To a fanny.
Very nice.
Nice.
This is actually Andy's. She is in New Jersey, and I am occupying her apartment while she's gone, which has been very nice. Thank you.
That's great. That's great. And all your therapy things are up on the wall there.
Yes, I have occupied this space immensely.
That's good.
By the end of the year, it's going to be wallpaper.
Yeah.
You can just take a picture and print it as wallpaper. Merch.
Not bad. Not bad. I love some of the comments that I saw on your website.
Yeah.
They're really good. Really
Thanks. Good. So why don't we do this at the end? We've entered our shameless plugging part of the day. So why don't you let people know where they can find you? How can people support your endeavor? Because certainly it's an initiative that should be supported. So what are ways that people can help you or participate, whatever?
Sure. So our website, subwaysocialclub.com, Instagram, just Subway Social Club. Yeah, we've already done that. And then I think if you have, we're doing a virtual commute, where the idea is that there's just we pair you with a rider, and then, you know, we have we might do a prompt, like just describe your favorite Subway story or your favorite, your Subway horror story, whatever. So I think we're going to do one maybe next week or the week after. But if you follow us on Instagram, you can find all the information. But also, if you're like a creative person and you also want to connect and learn more how to get into the Subway Social Club or help brainstorm strategically, you know, let us know, because I'm definitely I don't think a creative, like, in that way. So we're looking to
I wouldn't say that.
Yeah,
we're looking for you know, if you love the Subway, contact us and we can figure something out. Mom, do you have any?
You're very creative. So yeah, creativity.
Yeah, just reach out and we'll
different packages is what I say. Okay.
And if you want pins, let me know. If you live in the US, I can send you some pins for free as well.
Oh yeah, so why don't we do that? I know some people have left, but you said that maybe we would do a giveaway on the show. Can we, I'll write people's names down and then maybe we can do something like that?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I was thinking that if you don't have a pin, or if you don't have pins and you either know someone who does, I guess send you, Matthew, their contact info. What did you?
So why don't we do this? There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's like 6 people in the room. I think many of them have pins already.
Oh, okay.
If anybody doesn't, we can send them a pin. How does that sound?
Yeah, that's perfect.
or we can send them an extra pin and they can give it to a friend.
Exactly. Yeah.
I'm going to screenshot this and then we'll figure it out. Awesome. Well, again, thank you so much for both of you being here. I just loved this conversation and really am excited to continue it. Instead of doing a question this week, for you pitching a question this week, let's wait till you're going to be doing a subway ride, digital subway ride.
Yes.
That way we can plan that into the programming of the week.
Sure.
We can say like, hey, we're starting on Monday. Here's the question of the week. And then on Thursday, we're going to be doing a digital subway ride. Does that sound fun?
That sounds great.
Cool. We'll talk about it more after. But if you're just tuning in and you have not heard about Art Plus People or what Creative Lunch is, Art Plus People is an organization that is really interested in creating public programming and works that bring people together. We're really interested in conversation and community. And so this is one of our programs. It's called Creative Lunch. We get together around lunchtime and some really wildly creative people share some tasty ideas for us to munch on. So thanks for doing that today, Claire and Wendy. It's just really such a pleasure.
Thank you for having us. It was so much fun. And thank you
so much. It was a lot of fun. I couldn't think of a better way to spend a little Sunday afternoon.
Yeah, why not? It's good to, I just think that conversation is so nourishing.
It is.
And talking to other creatives, it's just one of my favorite things. So thanks for being here, and we'll see you later, everyone.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye, everybody. Bye.
Guys, this is